You are not losing respect because people are unkind. You are losing it through something you do constantly, something that feels completely reasonable in the moment, something that most people would even call a virtue. And that is exactly why it is so difficult to stop. Respect does not disappear all at once. There is rarely a single moment where someone decides to stop taking you seriously. It happens gradually, almost invisibly, through a pattern of small signals that accumulate over time into a complete picture of how much your boundaries, your opinions, and your time can be negotiated. And by the time you notice the respect is gone, the pattern that eroded it has already been running for months. This video is about that pattern. Not a list of things to fix. One specific behavior that quietly communicates to everyone around you that your positions are movable, your standards are flexible, and your word means slightly less than it appears to. But before we get there is a particular moment in social interactions where this behavior shows up most visibly, and where its effect on how others perceive you is most immediate and most damaging. We will get to that exact moment. And when we do, you will recognize it instantly because you have almost certainly been there recently. First, let us understand how respect actually works, because most people have it backwards. Respect is not given to people who are impressive. It is not reserved for the loudest, the most successful, or the most socially dominant person in the room. Those things attract attention. Respect is something different. Respect is what people feel toward someone whose behavior is consistently predictable in a specific way. Someone whose yes reliably means yes, whose no reliably means no, and whose stated position does not quietly shift the moment it meets resistance. Predictability in this sense is not boring. It is powerful. It communicates that the person in front of you operates from an internal reference point rather than an external one. That they are not scanning the room for permission before deciding what they think. That their behavior is governed by something consistent inside them rather than by whoever is applying the most pressure at any given moment. Here is the strange part. Most people believe they are this kind of person. They believe their boundaries are clear, their positions are genuine, and their consistency is solid. But then something happens in a real interaction. A moment of social pressure, an awkward silence, someone's visible disappointment, and the position shifts. Not dramatically, just slightly, just enough to relieve the tension, just enough to make things comfortable again. And in that moment of small surrender, something is communicated that no amount of confident behavior before or after it can fully undo. Most people completely miss how much weight that single moment carries. Because from the inside, it feels like flexibility, like emotional intelligence, like being reasonable. From the outside, from the perspective of the person who just watched your position move, it feels like something else entirely. It feels like information, specific, actionable information about exactly how much pressure it takes to move you. And once someone has that information, they never quite unknow it. The behavior that costs you respect more than almost anything else is not aggression, not arrogance, not social awkwardness. It is caving, and then explaining why you caved as though the explanation restores what the cave just cost you. It looks like this. You say no to something. Someone pushes back. Not aggressively, just persistently. And you fold. But because folding feels uncomfortable, you attach a reason to it. You say you thought about it more. You say you misunderstood the situation initially. You say it is fine actually, you do not mind. The reason sounds plausible. It might even be partially true. But everyone in that interaction felt what actually happened. The pressure arrived, and the position moved. And the reason given afterward is not an explanation. It is a face-saving device that fools nobody. Here is what makes this so insidious. The cave itself is damaging. But the explanation attached to it doubles the damage. Because now you have not just moved your position, you have demonstrated that you will also reframe the move as something other than what it was. And that combination, shifting under pressure and then narratively covering the shift, is what builds a specific reputation over time. Not the reputation of someone who is flexible or reasonable. The reputation of someone whose stated positions are opening offers. Has this ever happened to you? You held a boundary clearly, felt proud of it, then watched yourself slowly negotiate it away across the following hour, and ended the interaction wondering how you got from there to here? That experience is not a character flaw. It is a deeply trained response to social discomfort. Most people who cave under pressure are not weak-willed. They are highly sensitive to the emotional temperature of their environment. They feel other people's disappointment, frustration, or discomfort almost physically, and the cave is not surrender so much as it is relief. A way of lowering the emotional temperature of the room back to something tolerable. And this is where it gets really interesting, because that sensitivity, the very thing driving the cave, is not the problem. It is an asset in almost every other context. The problem is that it has been recruited into the service of managing other people's comfort at the direct expense of your own credibility. The solution is not to become less sensitive. It is to change what you do with the discomfort instead of immediately resolving it by moving your position. Because here is what most people never realize about the moment of social pressure that triggers the cave. That moment is not actually asking you to change your position. It is testing whether your position was real in the first place. And the test is not aggressive. It does not announce itself as a test. It simply presents discomfort. A silence, a frown, a repeated request, a visible disappointment, and waits to see what you do with it. Every time you hold through that discomfort without moving, you pass the test. Every time you cave to relieve it, you fail, and the person applying the pressure files the result away, often without conscious awareness, as a data point about how you operate. Which leads directly to the part that changes everything. Because knowing this intellectually is not enough. The shift has to happen somewhere deeper than understanding. Remember the exact moment I described at the beginning, the one where your position shifts just slightly, just enough to relieve the tension, and something is communicated that confident behavior before or after cannot undo. This is where we close that loop. Because that moment is not just a social interaction. It is a referendum on your relationship with your own discomfort. And until that relationship changes, the behavior will not. Here is the core truth that makes everything else make sense. You cannot hold a position under external pressure if you cannot tolerate the internal discomfort that pressure creates. The external cave is always preceded by an internal one, a moment where the discomfort of someone else's disappointment feels more urgent than the importance of the position you were holding. And so the position moves, not because it was wrong, because the discomfort of defending it temporarily outweighed the cost of abandoning it. The long-term cost, of course, is much higher, but long-term costs are abstract. Discomfort in the present moment is immediate. And the human nervous system is not particularly good at trading present relief for future credibility. It wants the tension gone now. The cave delivers that. And the respect erodes so gradually that the connection between the behavior and the consequence never feels direct enough to change anything. Now here is the part that nobody talks about, because it requires something most advice in this space completely skips over. Rebuilding respect is not about becoming firmer, louder, or more confrontational. It is not about rehearsing better responses or learning scripts for difficult conversations. It is about developing a genuine tolerance for the specific discomfort of being temporarily misunderstood, temporarily disappointing, or temporarily in conflict with someone whose approval you value. That tolerance does not come from willpower. It comes from a shift in what you believe the discomfort means. Right now, when someone pushes back on your position and the tension rises, part of you reads that tension as evidence that something has gone wrong, that you have damaged the relationship, misjudged the situation, or been unreasonable without realizing it. And from that reading, the cave feels like correction, like maturity, like the responsible thing to do. But the tension is not evidence of any of those things. It is simply what it feels like when two people have different positions and neither has moved yet. That is not a problem to be solved by surrender. It is a normal feature of any relationship between two people with genuine interiority. And sitting inside that tension without immediately resolving it is not aggression. It is the most honest thing you can do. The moment you genuinely internalize that, when the discomfort of holding a position stops reading as danger and starts reading as neutrality, your behavior changes without effort. You stop caving not because you are trying harder but because the trigger that caused the cave has been defused. And the people around you feel that shift immediately. Not because you became harder to deal with, because you became harder to move. And there is a specific quality that belongs exclusively to people who are difficult to move. Not impossible, not rigid, but genuinely, quietly, consistently grounded in their own positions. That quality is called integrity. And it turns out integrity is not something you declare. It is something people discover about you the moment they apply pressure and find that nothing moved. That is when respect stops being something you have to earn and starts being something you simply carry.